And what branch of service were you in?
I was in the Army.
And what was your highest rank?
Sergeant.
And what general locations did you serve in?
I served in Georgia, Fort Benning, and Fort Rucker, Alabama, Fort Carson, Colorado, Camp Ames, Korea, Berlin, Germany, and Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Wow. And were you drafted or did you enlist?
I enlisted. I was going to be drafted, and they usually took them to the Marines. I didn't want to go to the Marines, so I went into the Army because I thought it was really, they were gung-ho, you know.
And where were you living at the time that you were drafted?
I was living in Rock House, Kentucky, and it's called Neon. We got our mail in actually in Hemphill, Kentucky, which later we went to Goose Creek, which is about a quarter of a mile down from Hemphill.
And do you recall the date that you were drafted, the exact date?
You mean that I entered into the service?
Yes.
Yes, it was February the 10th, 1961, with my brother and Bobby Meade, my brother Junior, which is deceased. He died in January of this year.
And so why did you pick the Army?
Because I thought the Army was the better way to go, because I knew in between times when you were serving in the day and night, they let you go to school. And I didn't think the other ones would do it. But I knew the Army did. And I was a poor boy, and I wanted to go back to school.
And tell me about your first days in service, like basic training and everything.
Basic training to me, I had run the mountains like a mountain goat, and I had plowed with a turning plow, and since I was 9 years old, and I was very strong, although I was small, and I was very, very strong. And my basic training was a lot of fun. I was a little artistic, so I got to draw the battlefield out that we laid out to practice in, and checking out where the enemy would be and stuff like that. I got to draw it out, and I knew where the bunkers were and everything. So when it come my turn, I knew right where to fire, right what to pick out and where to pick it out. That wasn't fair. And our drill sergeant gave me the honor of carrying the flag and being ahead of the company. So our company, our platoon was the first platoon, and I was in the first squad. And he made me, I was the smallest man in our squad, and he made me the team leader, which was an acting sergeant. And he told them, he said, "This is the meanest man in here." Now, Sergeant Davis, which was his name, was about 6'8", 6'7", or 6'8", big guy. And he said to the whole company, Company A, he says, this man is the meanest man in here. If you don't believe it, You and I and him will go around this house and we'll see who comes out. He and I will come out, but you won't. I'll never forget that.
Do you remember any of other of your instructors or commanding officers during basic training?
Yes, we had Sergeant Gripes, which I think he and I were good friends. He was from West Virginia. And his name was James. I think he was from West Virginia. And he was actually, at first, he was second lieutenant over the second platoon. And then he came over the first platoon. But while he was in the second platoon, they put me out to be an aggressor against them. You know, I was the enemy. And I just walked up with the enemy uniform on into his platoon. And I picked him up. And I threw him over and I got the gun and shot everyone. I acted. It was an act. And he got mad and he picked me up by the pistol belt and threw it. He said, and he chewed the guys out. He said, you guys let him walk up and kill a whole bunch of you. I'll never forget that.
So what were you trained in specifically during basic training?
I was trained as Strategic Army Command. And we were combat ready. We trained like jungle training. We studied Che Guevara. And we trained after his methods. And we studied other types of training, you know, like skiing, jumping out of our planes, and then patrol, coming down ropes from helicopters and stuff. And we dropped the Marines. No, it was 101st Airborne we were aggressors against. Of course, we were all Americans, fighting Americans, but we were all, you know, training and doing stuff like that. We trained in all around Georgia, Fort Gordon. We trained down in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, up in I forget the name of the fort in North Carolina. We trained down in at the air base in Florida, and that's when I went to Korea. I went from strike, and we got combat ready when I forget his name, was Cuba. We had Cubans were acting up, and we had to go down, and I forget where we went.
And so you went through boot camp, and so where did you go exactly after that? To Korea? Or
To Korea.
Oh, to Korea, okay. And what was your first impressions of the country when you arrived?
It was barren and clean, and the people were very poor, and it smelled terrible. They had they saved human feces, and they saved that up and in troughs and in holes, and they'd dip the bucket down and put it on a thing. On each side, they carried 2 buckets, and they made it so it'd go over their shoulder, and they'd carry 2 up there, and they'd pour it into the rice paddies. I thought it was barren, but to me, it was an interesting experience. And they had grass over dried up grass like we call sage, broom sage and stuff like that. They'd take the rice, and after they gathered the rice, they'd beat the rice out, and they'd cut it and bring it down and beat it out and get the rice out of it. They'd make roofs over their houses, over their huts. And to me, I thought that was interesting because it was an old, they were still back in the, like to us, we were so modern. They were still, I mean, it was really something to think about. And Vietnam was the same way, only Vietnam was shot up when I was over there. It looked like hell. Can I say that word?
That's fine. So what were your assignments in Korea?
What was
your assignments in Korea?
I was a dog handler, and I guarded inside the maximum security area. We called that the MSA, and we had missiles buried there, ready to go anywhere, and they're still there. And I'll say it's near Camp Ames, near Chang Tong Ni.
And so how long were you in Korea for?
Well, 1 year. A little over a year, because my dad passed away during that time, and I was sent over here on a 30-day leave, and I had to make that up in Korea.
And did you see any combat in Korea while you were there?
Combat? No, but we saw some scary times. Times that we had to get all our forces ready, and because some of the Koreans were talking about, North Korea was talking about coming down and taking us over again, which they always do. They're always trying to aggravate South Korea. And I actually, the next I was a courier, and I went from Middle Korea up to north, near almost to Seoul. And then we flew missile heads, the tips, that had the triggers in it that set everything off as soon as the missiles hit. That triggered it, and it went off. So we flew some of them up by helicopter, and I was a shotgun guard. I flew out on the door with a shotgun, with a machine gun. And I thought that was funny. And that's when I wanted to become a pilot.
So after you were in Korea for a year, where did you go after that?
I came home, and I spent a few months out. And I went in back into Fort Knox. And oddly enough, my job was the guard to, at first, my first job in Fort Knox was to be the sergeant of the guard, or, the enlisted officer of the guard. And we guarded, some of them guarded the gold that was there. And we guarded, my job was to guard the ammunition and the stuff that you poured on, like they mixed DDT with oil. I believe it was a fuel that they fly in airplanes with or something like that. And they had the different names for it. Some of them had orange stripes, some of them had green stripes, some of them had white stripes, and we had to go in and count the barrels. And actually, I found one of them leaking when I was there. It was leaking all over the place, and I had to walk through it. And I found out later that was Agent Orange, and they had it stored there at Fort Knox, and that was in, I believe it's in 64. That's 63 still. I think it was, yeah, and then after that, I got out of that, and we trained for something like a month, pre-training for the people that were going to be astronauts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they would pit us against monkeys and stuff. Yeah, see who they train the monkeys to do that. Like on a circle, you take a nail, try to put the point on you had to hold the point on a little stick that was sticking up and going around and around and around. You did that for 3 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was grueling, and I fell asleep.
So after Fort Knox, what was next?
Well, I didn't. In Fort Knox, I also trained in cooking.
Oh, okay.
And I became the leader of the cooks there. First day I made salads. Second day, my mother was a wonderful cook, and I just did after her. So I made the guy that led the cooks, because I was a corporal and that made me sergeant again. I made corporal more times than Harvard's got little liver pills from fighting and stuff.
So when were you? So you were stationed at Fort Knox.
Yeah.
And then what? Where did you go after that?
I went to Berlin.
And what did you do in Berlin?
In Berlin, I guarded I forget the building they called it, but it's where the general and all the other guys stayed, and that's where I stayed at the Berlin headquarters. I was guard there, and some of them guarded the prisoners that helped Hitler, and they had about 3 or 4 of them when I was there, but I didn't get to see the bad part of that, but I did. They made me the sergeant or the head of the enlisted men that stayed. We stayed at the 4 Power building, and that was called the Allied Control Authority, or 4 Powers. And I stayed there, and my job was to identify the Soviet officers at Checkpoint Charlie and follow them back without them knowing it, and watching them wherever they went. And I had to be their shadow. I shadowed them, and then I went in. I lived there, and I went in my cubicle and stayed there until it was time to take the flag down. And when we took the flag down, then they came out, and I would follow them back. They didn't, without their knowing. I was the observation man to go, where they went. That's where I went. And I followed them, and if they got out of their normal route, I took pictures of where they went and where they went in. And I had a Petrie camera, and I give it to the 4 Powers when I got back, the film. And what they did with it was their business.
Wow.
Of course, I guess they kept a lot of that on file. I had a clearance, a secret clearance. And that's how I became duty foreman. I had that clearance, and I flew all over.
And so how long were you in Berlin for?
I was in Berlin. I was supposed to be there 3 years. I was in there 2 years and a half. And then they needed somebody in Vietnam like that. So I went over, and I got over here, and I trained dogs for a while. And then when I stayed in Fort Benning, and while I was in Fort Benning, they attached me to a dog unit, helping Sergeant Dubois train dogs and the people to go to Vietnam. And my last training was with a 50th Scout dog. I trained the 49th and the 50th, 2 units to go over there. That was 6 months. They trained 90 days apiece, and it's 3 months, and then they go to Vietnam. And then I wanted to fly, so I went from there to Fort Rooker, Alabama. And I got my commission. Then I took a physical, and they said there was something wrong with my heart, and they put me then in arts and crafts. And we made a bear at the gate, a statue of a bear at the gate there, and I worked there for about 3 or 4 months, and they sent me from there. I had my boy was born there, my son, and he was born in February, and I think in March or April they sent me to Fort Carson, Colorado in '67, and I trained for 6 weeks, and then they held me back, and they gave me a job to carry as a courier. And I flew into Vietnam several times. I went into Korea a couple of times, and I went up to the DMZ where they had Agent Orange too. They had Agent Orange where I flew over in Phu Mai. I went to Phu Mai, and I had to stay there 2 weeks because we couldn't get out of there. And when I got back to the Saigon airport, we had about that 2 weeks, and there was kind of a little lull. So I got down to the airport and came back over. I went from there, I went to Yokohama, not Yokohama, Yokota, Japan, to the Yokota airport. From there, I flew over to I took a satchel over to, what's the name of that place in China? The British owned?
I'm not sure.
The British owned it. And I thought it would be like Korea. But I went over to that place and they had McDonald's.
Just to kind of backtrack a little bit, so you got to Vietnam. How long were you in Vietnam for?
For that time?
Yes.
For that time, I was in there for 2 weeks fighting. I finally got out of there.
And so you saw combat while you were there for those 2 weeks?
I certainly did.
And did you experience any casualties in your unit?
Yes. Not in my unit. I didn't. My unit was in Colorado.
Oh, okay. But you saw casualties around you?
Yes, in Phu Mai.
And were you ever a prisoner of war?
No.
And can you explain to me your time in Vietnam? So you were there for 2 weeks, you left, and then did you come back after that?
Yes, I came back, and both times we flew into the airport in Saigon. And then when I came back, I went up, that was in July of '68.
And what were your assignments in Vietnam?
I was a courier.
Okay. And so
I wasn't assigned in Vietnam. I just flew in there and I go to wherever I had to take that satchel, that little briefcase, and had orders and itineraries. They'd make an itinerary for me, and I followed the itinerary. And I go over there and I go wherever they wanted me to, like the 2 airports that I could go to mainly was Saigon and up at I Corps. And from there, I flew by helicopter to the rock pile where the 7th Marines was. The 1st Marines were at I Corps. Then I also flew up to the 1st Infantry, which was along the DMZ by helicopter. And I went to Da Nang. I went down to see a buddy down at the Bearcat Missile Base. And while I was there, I had gone to school with him. And we used to polish shoes in Neon. He lived in Neon, and I'd walk over. It's only 4 miles. And when I was in school, I went to Neon High School for a little bit. And me and Frank could go over on weekends to polish shoes. And then my brothers would come over. They had girlfriends over there, and they'd take my money. I got off track, didn't I?
Oh, no, that's okay.
And I was drinking terribly while I was over there, but I never smoked weed. We were the ones that, before Vietnam, I think it was called Mary Jane. Then in Vietnam, they had a name for it, weed, red weed. Yeah, Vietnam Red. And some of them brought a whole sack full back. Nobody got checked. Some of them wouldn't bring their clothes back. They'd bring guns and stuff like that. And while I was there, we piled the dead gooks up. That's what we called them. Some of them that have gold teeth, and the sergeant go over there and pull her teeth out and stick them in his pocket, the gold teeth. Some of them would cut their ears off and put them on their belts.
And can you explain to me the combat that you saw in Vietnam?
Some of the combat?
Yeah, the combat that you experienced, if you're comfortable with that.
Okay. I was in a bunker, and this guy came up. He was about, well, we had 100 yards of free space. He came out of the free space. I had my gun right on him. And I pulled the trigger, and I saw him jump back and fall. And I was scared to death. But then I got sick, and I started throwing up. The first...
Now, when you were in Vietnam, or just in general, did you sustain any injuries while you were there?
No, I had my ears messed up before I went to Vietnam, but they got worse. My hearing did while I was there.
And can you explain to me if you were you awarded any medals or citations after your service?
While I was in there, after my service?
Well, during or after?
Yeah, I was awarded good conduct, occupation medals, and stuff like that. But any Bronze Stars or anything like that, no. We managed to keep out of stuff like that. You know, we had a big wall set up, and they had a little hole about this big. We guarded that hole, and no, what was the question?
Oh, it was just with the awards and medals that you received and stuff. But I think we went over that. Now, did you stay in touch with your family while you were throughout your service?
No, when I wrote them letters, yes.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
And what was the food like over in Vietnam while you were stationed there?
The food?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I like that. Well, when you got to eat anything besides C rations, it was K rations. And what it was dried beef and stuff that you put in the water and reconstituted. And that it wasn't bad. You got used to it after a while. But while I was there, every time I was there, they'd tell me, save your sugar, save your sugar. And if you weren't, they'd send people out of a day on patrols to make sure that they were gone. The gooks were gone. And this was during the Tet Offensive that I'm talking about. And that was the worst part I saw. I went to Hong Kong. That's where I was trying to say before.
Oh, okay.
And I thought it'd be like Korea, or, you know, and it was like New York City.
That was during one of your killing missions, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And did you always have enough supplies? Do you remember ever running out of supplies?
Did you know something? The military never, and they still don't, have enough supplies to fully supply their troops. That's my belief. I know they didn't then. We tried new stuff while we were in strike. The Strategic Army Command. I'm no good now.
And did you feel pressure or stress while you were over there?
Yeah, and I'm feeling it right now.
Cool. And how did you handle the stress?
Pardon?
How did you handle the stress that you felt?
Well, I handled it because you get what we called jet lag, or the fear, and the fear, the hatred, the anger was from seeing your American buddies get killed that you had met and talked to and stuff. You called them your buddies, and you felt like bursting. You're gonna burst, and you wondered if you was going to be next. It got to be like, from am I? It's when am I? Am I going to die? Or when am I going to die? It went from, am I going to get killed? Or will I get killed? When will I get killed?
And did you ever have something for good luck? Did you have a Bible you carried with you? Or...
I had a New Testament. Oh, yeah.
And how did you entertain yourselves while you were over there?
With a guitar.
With a guitar? Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool.
I carried it wherever I went.
Oh, nice.
It was a little half guitar.
Oh, okay.
And I got a 3/4 one now. Well, I got one for Raymond and one for Nicole. We got 2 great grandkids living with us.
Oh.
And our granddaughter.
That's nice. And did you see any USO shows while you were over there?
See any what?
USO shows?
Unfortunately, yes.
Why is that unfortunate?
Well, it was Hanoi Jane that I saw. I saw Bob Hope, which was really, 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 oh, that was fantastic. And they come to Saigon all the time. And, they also go to I-Corps. And they come down to those 2 places. And they bring them down, for relief. And then they bring them down. Well, while I was over there, I got to see Bob Hope. And I got to see Hanoi Jane. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've heard a few of these with all the USO shows.
Yeah.
Now, did you ever go on leave during your service?
In Vietnam?
Mm-hmm.
No.
No.
I went.
What about Korea or all the other places you've been to?
I went on a R&R.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, where did you go then?
I went to Seoul.
What did you do there?
I watched. I drank. Mm-hmm. When I was on leave.
Oh, when you were in R&R in Seoul, what did you do there?
Well, I played my guitar, and I'd go watch movies that I couldn't understand. And women. Hunt for women.
Do you recall any particular humorous or unusual events that during when you were in Vietnam or in Korea or Germany? Anything funny?
Stuff that I thought was funny. Now, I'm going to say something that's pretty dirty, and I hope you don't take it the wrong way. While I was married, but while I was in Berlin, I had a girlfriend who was a movie starlet. And her sister worked at the Commandant. That was the Germans' place. And our first sergeant worked at the Commandant of the day. And he was going out on his wife at that moment. And one of his workers said, "Hey, Tops, what are you getting for Christmas?" And another of them said, "Hey, you know what, Warmer?" And the girl that he was going to said, I've got the measure. She could talk English. She said, "I'll measure it." I thought that was funny. But stuff like that. And I thought peculiar the way the Koreans buried their dead.
How did they do that?
Well, they'd hold them overnight, and everybody get around and they'd drink and have fun. And then they'd all follow him up, and they'd set him up on the hill, and they'd dig a hole and set him down, cross-legged. And they'd have him overlooking, his face be overlooking the hill. And they didn't put him in a casket or anything. And they buried him that way, sitting overlooking the hill. That was their religious ceremony. Tell me for what reason, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I thought that was pretty peculiar.
And what did you think of your officers and fellow servicemen?
I thought they're some of the greatest guys I ever knew. And I still do. I think that anybody that goes into the Army and defends this country, I think is a hero. And when I came back, here's a little thing, that I got to hate America when I came back. Not America, but the people. This woman asked me 3 questions, which you've asked me none of them. You asked me about the food. I thought it was great. She said, "Can I interview you?" And I said, "Yes." So she asked me the first 3 questions. She says, "How was Vietnam? Was it nice?" I said, "It was pure hell, woman." She says, "Did you like the women there?" I said, "I don't know. I went to bed with donut dollies." I was throwing it back at her that I went with Americans. And she said, "You kill any children while you was over there?" I said, "Woman, you take that microphone and shove it just as far as you can, you know where." And I walked off. And when I got out of the Army, I came from Colorado in uniform. My wife was in Connecticut, up in Connecticut then, and I was coming to her. And I was going to stop off in Kentucky, which later I brought my wife that back down and went back. But I stopped off, that's when I got out. And what was the question?
Oh, it was just about your fellow servicemen and how you felt about them. But no, that's okay.
Well, I went down to home, and they called me baby killer. They spit at me on the bus and made me ride in the back. And that hurt me so bad because I didn't go over to Vietnam. I didn't to kill anybody. I didn't go to, especially to kill a child. But I went to the orphanage, and I gave some money to the orphanage, MPC, the American currency. They used MPC and instead of money. And I gave them some money to buy food and stuff with.
That's nice.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah. And did you keep a journal while throughout any of your service? Did you ever keep a journal or a diary?
I started a diary once, and I got as far as, my name is Lloyd Ray Sexton.
And so where were you when your service ended, when you were discharged?
Fort Carson, Colorado, the last time.
And what was the date? Do you remember the date?
No, I don't. It was in either August or September.
Of what year?
1970.
Oh, okay.
I stayed 9 years, a little over 9 years. What burns me up is, and you can see it in my last DD 214, I got honorable. But, you know, they said that I was like a killer. That's what I got out on. And I was trained from the day I got in there. No, third day after I got in there. I was trained to do nothing but seek and kill, hide and kill, different ways of taking prisoners and killing people. And what the hell did they think? That because I had gotten a fight with a lieutenant and I was court-martialed and they knew he wasn't, and they knew that it was his fault because he let my baby get drunk on beer while he was trying to make my wife. And I told them that they said I was a druggie. The only drug I ever drank was cough syrup that had codeine in it. And it was not counted as a drug back then. It was an over-the-counter medication that we had fun with. I'd drink half a bottle and my buddy would drink a half a bottle. We did that about 3 or 4 times.
And what was your homecoming like when you officially got home discharged from the military?
I got spit on and called baby killer.
Yeah.
I was hated.
And what did you do after? Well, did you go back to work, or what did you do after the service?
Actually, I went and Kenny Rogers That's what I did before I came home. I went to Kenny Rogers for 2 weeks out in Texas. And this guy came and interviewed me and listened to me play. And he hired me. Elton Brett, he had tuberculosis. And he was a wonderful singer. I mean, Murray didn't like Kenny Rogers that much. But she met him and I introduced him to her. And we talked a while and I finally just said, Murray, let's go. Because she didn't think much of him.
So did you go to work after a while? Or?
I played music professionally with that Grand Ole Opry group. And then I went with another Grand Ole Opry man, Dick Curlis. And he was just going up and down the Eastern Seaboard. And Dick got too old, so me and the band, we kept doing it. And that's where I met my wife. And I looked and saw her, and I knew the people that she was with. I'd seen them about 3 or 4 times. Now, John was from West Virginia, and she was with them. And I thought, man, this is a beautiful woman. I was trying to get over my wife. I had been split up for a while. And I saw I had been living with another woman. And I left her because I didn't like her. I mean, I loved her, but like a sister. And I didn't want to go to bed with my sister, what I felt was a sister. So I met Mary. And I looked at her and I says, if I jump off this stage, will you dance with me? I didn't realize it was high. It was way higher than that table.
Oh, man.
And it was that high. And I jumped down and my knee hit my chin and cut my lip real bad. But I went over there, I was bleeding. I said, will you dance with me? I just bought a pair of camel boots and they were wet. And they stunk to high heaven. And it was raining. And I walked through the mud puddles, see if it was waterproof. And when I got home, I threw those boots away.
And did you ever go back to school?
Yes.
Where did you go?
Norwalk Community Tech.
What did you go for?
I went, and I have a certificate, 2 years, as an arts and craft therapeutic director.
Oh, okay. And was your education supported by the GI?
Recreation and leisure, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Did you go back with GI Bill?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And did you make any close friends during your service?
During the service, yes, I did, and I wish I could meet some of them.
Do you keep close, or do you keep contact with any of them?
No, I don't even know where they are. The fact about it is, I sneak down sometimes and try to find them, and she gets lonely and yells at me, and I have a bad heart. She wants to make sure that I'm okay. But there's another story that I really, the Lord has helped me, because that was a bad thing, and then it turned out to be a good thing.
And so how did your military experience influence your thinking about war, the military in general?
Well, I think war is hell, and it shouldn't be, people shouldn't be, anger will always persist in all of the countries. hatred. And that's all it is. I'd say it's political. And through politics, people try to have a dynasty in their political reasoning. I won't say beliefs, because that word's been worn out. I'll say reasoning. And they fight to prove their point. And I think since time began, as long as a man could carry a stick, he'd get angry at another man and beat him up. And I think anger and hatred is going to ruin the world one day. That's what I think about war.
And did you join any veterans organizations?
Yes, I belong to the disabled DAB, and I belong to the American Legion.
Oh, okay. And you're still active in them today?
I belong to them, but I don't go to them simply because they drink. And I would have went to them before. I belonged to only the DAV, but I didn't go to them, but I drank anyways then.
And do you attend any of the reunions that for the Vietnam War and all that?
No, I was asked to have my name placed to be honored, but they asked me for $5 to do that. Why should I do that?
And how did your service and experience affect your life overall?
It absolutely ruined me as a person. It ruined me physically, and I've got brain damage through PTSD. Through heart disease, and through cancer, and through Parkinson's disease, and through my lungs, pulmonary. It's ruined me mentally because I have weird dreams about it, and sometimes actual things that I did pops up. And sometimes I could be driving along and I go way past where I was supposed to be because I see in my mind's eye people fighting and I'm staring. And I see of the day them picking up, and I helped them out of the concertina wire and brought them around.
And is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't covered in the interview?
Yes. When I came back, I was mistreated so bad that I thought the people hated me for what I'd done. And when I saw the people come back from the first war over in Iraq, the second war, and then when I see the people come back, I feel so wonderful that they're getting praised. And yesterday, I was sitting down at the beach with my wife, and I had my hat on. And a bunch of guys, young guys, came up to me, shaking my hand and thanking me for my service. And I thought, you know, this group is a wonderful group of people. I'm glad I served my country, and I've always been proud I served. But I didn't serve the people that wouldn't go serve. I served for the people that died and covered my back. The people that died so that our country could be free. And I remember two of my things that I said when I was in basic training, which one I don't know exactly 100% how they are, but I'll tell you what they mean. One of them says, I am an American fighting man. I serve in the forces which guard my country and our way of life. I'm proud to give my life in their defense, which I was, and I am again. And it says, I will always be an American fighting man. And I don't know what it says from there, but I'm going to tell you, that is so true. When you get post-traumatic stress disorder, you will always fight. And I'm always fighting. And I'm proud of each and every person that served, whether they went to Vietnam or not. They served their country. And now they're even better because it's a country that it's a people that volunteers to serve their country, to guard our country and our way of life and our freedom. And I would do it all over again. I would be proud to, which I thought at 9/11. I had stopped drinking for a while. Every now and then I'd get a half pint and drink it. 9/11 happened. I was sure I'd go back to war. So I went and prepared for it. I got a fifth of vodka. And in 4 drinks, I killed that bottle. And I did that almost every day until, that was in 2001, until Turkey Day, Thanksgiving Day, at which time I got put in jail, and they sent me for reevaluation, and I was evaluated with PTSD, and I had to go to Rocky Hill for a year, away from my wife, and I was so proud when I got back because I haven't drank since then, and I've got closer to the spiritual, not organizational Christian life, but spiritual. Through the Spirit, I've learned to live. And I've learned to be a God-fearing man because He's a spirit of pure love. And that's what I want to do. I want to love people with a pure love, which is impossible. But I can try. And the more harder I try, the closer I can get.
Well, I'd like to thank you for your service and for taking the time to be interviewed today. I really appreciate it.
And I'd like to thank you for the time you've spent. And I'd like to thank you for what you're doing